Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Healing Brain. This is our weekly webinar and podcast here at Doman International, where we take questions from parents with kids with special needs from around the world. So wherever you are and however you're watching this, whether you're watching on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, you can type your questions into the comments box and we will do our best to answer them. My name is Spencer Doman. I'm the director of Doman International, which is a nonprofit organization that gives families of children with special needs holistic solutions to all of their children's issues. I have 20 years of experience coaching families of children with special needs, and I specialize specifically with children with reading difficulties, sensory issues, speech delay, and learning challenges. Personally, I have a master's degree in early childhood education, and I've also written two books at Doman International, the Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness and Answering Autism. I'm joined here by Colleen Hudson. Colleen is the first person at Doman International to speak to new families when they are onboarding onto our program, and she answers all of your questions when you want to learn about Doman International. And she also advocates for families as they begin our program. And she's also been around this program her entire life, and it has benefited members of her family. Thanks so much for joining me, Colleen.
Always my pleasure. Love it.
Well, today, the topic of this week is we're going to be talking about the confusion and challenges that are created around diagnosis with children with neurodevelopmental delays and special needs. Now, I know some of you who enrolled for this webinar are expecting us to be interviewing Cleisha, who's a Doman mom who's just written a book about her experience doing the program. Unfortunately, Cleisha, something last minute came up. She wasn't able to join us today, but she will be joining us next week in next week's session. So we're going to be very excited to interview her about her book, which is called Great Victory, A Mother's Faith, A Daughter's Fight, that Cleisha wrote about her daughter, Maya. Maya has been on the Doman program for quite some time. And so I'm interviewing Cleisha about her experience as a mom of a child with special needs, but also her experience doing the Doman program and the changes that she's had with Maya. And this book, Great Victory, is available on Amazon in case you want to get the book and read it before next week's podcast. Okay, so getting to this week's topic, as I said, we're going to be talking about the challenges and confusion around diagnosis for children who have special needs and neurodevelopmental delays. So at Doman International, we see children with over 300 different diagnoses when they arrive at our doors. And those diagnoses vary from autism to cerebral palsy, to learning difficulties, to speech delay, to cortical visual impairment, Down syndrome, and now perhaps hundreds of other genetic diagnoses. And what we have found is that the diagnoses that are given to so many families of children with special needs actually create more challenges for those families than they do solutions. And there's a few reasons for this. The first thing is that very often the diagnosis does not clarify for the family what is the root cause issue of the child has. So, for example, if we look at the diagnosis autism, which might be the most common diagnosis that we see, autism really means a kind of profound obsession in self, okay? But that doesn't really point to what the root cause issue is. It's taking a symptom, which in this case is being overly focused on yourself and making it into a diagnosis. And a symptom and a diagnosis are two very different things. If we look at the term, for example, cerebral palsy, well, cerebral refers to the brain. Well, at least with cerebral palsy, it's referring to a part of the brain. the cerebrum, and palsy refers to something which either cannot move or is shaking. Okay, now the brain cannot move or be shaken, right? So that diagnosis also isn't very helpful. And so when a family comes to Doman International, we very much encourage them to look at their child in a different way. Rather than accept these diagnoses that are often weak and symptom focused, rather we do an evaluation of the child and we give the parents something called a functional neurological evaluation. And with the functional neurological evaluation, first of all, we tell the family exactly what parts of the brain have been affected for the child. So we'll say, based on your child's symptoms, your child is having issues in development with these brain areas. So in some children, it might be the cortex, which is the area of the brain that we use for reading and speaking and writing, right? And for other children, we might say your child, for their children, as if the child has some kind of like imaginary mental issue that they're trying to overcome. And it's not a psychological issue, it's a neurological, a brain developmental issue. And so many of these diagnoses don't address where's the underlying issue, what is the root cause issue that needs to be treated. And you cannot treat symptoms and make the root cause go away, right? So that's part of the issue. If you take a child with autism and you just view them as a collection of symptoms, if you just say, okay, this child doesn't speak well, and this child has social issues, and they have sensory issues and coordination problems, and okay, what are we going to do? All right, we're going to try some behavioral interventions to get them to improve their behavior, and we're going to try to get them to move their mouths better, to speak more. That has been the kind of conventional approach over the last 70 years. It has not worked. And unfortunately, we know this because the Doman Method has been around for 70 years. The conventional approaches have not greatly changed over the last 70 years. Physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, very little has changed in a lot of those areas. I do want to say, because I don't want to be unfair, there are specific professionals who have come out of those fields who have done amazing work, okay, and who have even impacted the Doman Method. So I'm not attacking all therapists and saying that they haven't done anything for people with neurodevelopmental issues. But what I'm saying is the kind of standard conventional approach has not made huge life differences for a lot of the children on our program. And because, again, they don't address the root cause issue. If we take the example of treating symptoms, maybe the best example of this is, imagine if I went to a doctor and I said, doctor, something is terribly wrong. I'm having terrible chest pains and my left arm has gone completely numb and I feel nauseous, right? A good doctor looks at all those symptoms and they say, you're having a heart attack, right? You might have symptoms in your arm or in your stomach or in your chest, but the root cause issue is in your heart and we need to treat that issue or you're going to die, right? A bad doctor would say, okay, here's a muscle relaxant for your chest, so your chest will relax, and I'm going to massage your left arm until you can feel it well again, and here's an anti-nausea pill for your nausea, right? So that doctor is treating the symptoms rather than the root cause problem. And of course, we know if, heaven forbid, that ever happened, the patient would probably die. But the crazy thing is that is how children with special needs are treated almost all the time. And it's amazing how you can, I've attended conferences for autism and cerebral palsy and Down syndrome where the word brain is not even mentioned, where people do entire speeches. They never talk about the brain. They just talk about symptoms. And they'll talk about how they're kind of using standardized evidence-based approaches, but they're the same approaches that have been used for decades and haven't gotten good results. And that's a shame. So the first step is really an understanding that most of these diagnoses don't actually pinpoint where the issue is. And if you don't know where to look first, you're not going to help these children. But then the second sadness is really that the diagnosis itself will often lead a parent down a road which is often hopeless. So I was speaking to a mom, for example, this morning. She's here at our clinic, and she was telling me that her child had a brain injury early on in life, and that brought her to the Doman method, right? She learned about the Doman method, but she lives in another country. This is her first visit to Doman International, and she said that later on, she was told that okay, her child presented certain autism symptoms, and some certain people had kind of said to her, oh, if he had gotten an autism diagnosis earlier, it would have solved all these issues. And she said, and we discussed how likely getting that diagnosis earlier would not have actually done a lot of help, right? Because first of all, her child was diagnosed with brain injury. The conventional approach to that is, speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. That's also the standard approach for autism as well. Now, with autism, they would add probably ABA therapy, but from our experience, ABA therapy for most children doesn't get great results, and it's also incredibly stressful. So I was saying to the mom, I don't think that diagnosis would have necessarily helped her child. In fact, it might have even wasted more time. She would have lost more time, perhaps running down different roads that don't work. And so these diagnoses often provide a lot of hopelessness and are just, to be honest, paths to the same road. This happens a lot. Colleen knows this from her experience, where families will receive a diagnosis, developmental delay maybe, and they're going through the conventional therapies, and at a certain point a doctor will say to them, we should get your child genetic testing. That's going to provide answers. The parents were told this is going to provide answers. If we find out your child has a genetic problem, we'll know what the problem is. The parents say, let's do it, right? So they do the genetic testing, and they'll say, okay, your child has a deletion on chromosome 12. Okay. And there are 100 children around the world who have this diagnosis. We don't know a lot about it. And then they'll say something along the lines of, so our recommended treatment course is physical, speech, and occupational therapy. So the parents have now been actually, in many ways, they feel like they're in a worse place than they were before, because now they've just been given kind of another hopeless diagnosis, and they're often told this is genetic, so your child really can't be helped. These therapies might change little things around the edges, but it's still a genetic diagnosis. And so my experience over the last 20 years is a lot of parents are given false hope around testing. They're kind of told, we'll do this test, and once we do that test, it'll give us answers. But very often it either provides no functional answers or a kind of hopeless answer where it's like, well, now we know why your child can't be helped, and
Right.
yeah. And Colleen knows this. I mean, we have many children, for example, with Down syndrome who join our program, and parents will go to the doctor and say, my child has sleep problems. And they'll say, well, that's because your child has Down syndrome, and it'll be like, oh, my child has constipation issues. Oh, that's because your child has Down syndrome. And the parents will say, but that's weird, because I know other parents with children with Down syndrome that don't have these issues. And it's like, well, every kid is different, and so the parent is like, wait a second, like that, it just feels like you're shrugging off. You don't have the answer to my question. And so you're using the diagnosis now as an excuse for not actually addressing that issue. So this is what I often, and that's why with parents, actually, once they've started the Doman method, I will usually advise them to be cautious around the testing that they do with their kids, because, as I've said, it's rare that it provides answers. Now, there's a lot of good testing. I shouldn't just say testing is bad. We do a lot of testing, but it tends to be real physiological testing that looks at markers in the child's blood, urine, stool that help us address issues that the child has from physiology, like stool tests that allow us to see what is the child's microbiome like. And then we can address it with a treatment. Okay, does this child need certain probiotics? Do they need certain prebiotics? What do they need to improve these markers? And then we do the testing again and hopefully see an improvement in that testing, right? Or even if we look at things like congenital issues, like many parents will ask me about leucovorin, which is kind of a hot topic right now. Should a child get folinic acid, which is often called glucovorin? Well, there's a test called the FRAT test, FRAT, that we do to see, does this child need it? If the answer is yes, we do it, and if no, the child doesn't need it, right? So there's no one size fits all approach here, but testing, and this is a piece of advice that I would give to any parent, whether you're coming to Doman International or not. If you're ever advised testing, it might be a wise thing to ask, okay, if we do this test, how will this change my child's treatment in the future? What are the treatment determinations that we're going to be making based on this test? And if they can't really give you a clear answer to that, that might be a warning sign that this testing is unnecessary. And testing can be expensive. It can also be very invasive. And it can also take up time too. So there better be good testing. Like, we don't do testing at Doman International just for kind of data collection purposes. If you're going to subject a child to any test and parents to time and cost, there better be a really good reason for it. And so any testing we do, there's a direct decision that's going to be made about that testing. Colleen, anything so far that you'd want to add to what we've said?
Yeah, I think, as you said, for families, obviously parents are just looking for answers. And so they are going to whatever the experts tell them, this is some way that we can get an answer about this aspect of your child's development or that one. And as things become more more important, different at different stages of a kid's development at different ages, certain symptoms might get worse, and parents are like, "Oh my gosh, we've got to get a test for, we've got to figure this out, right? We can't live like this." It's understandable to want to get answers, but as you were saying, Spencer, it tends to fragment things. Like, you run after this, run after that, and look, if you're bothering your pediatrician to get your kid tested and your insurance covers it, I'm talking to parents in the United States particularly, odds are your pediatrician say, sure, yeah, let's get that, let's get that test, let's find out. But then at the end of it, you end up with just another label without any kind of measurable difference or improvement or help. But at the same time, I think with all of the opportunity that the internet provides for families to do their own research on options, sometimes the temptation can be to put your kid on a certain regimen or something that you've read that, oh, this helped other children like my kid. So it's one of those complicated things where certain tests will give you actual customized answers that do apply to your child that can make a difference, and then other tests are just going to give you another name for their symptoms, which is like, oh, it's like you're just going to keep adding those to your kid. So often recently, in the last 6 months, even, or a year, I've had multiple families inquiring for the first time who have said, "Oh, my child has Down syndrome, but now also has a diagnosis of autism, and also a diagnosis of developmental delay, and also." I'm like, why do they keep handing you all of? But it's because those different diagnoses are sort of supposed to be accounting for symptoms that have come up. That maybe the doctor said, well, we're not sure if this is because of their Down syndrome, so now we're going to test for autism, or we're going to test for, like whatever reading, what's the word, dyslexia, all of these things, when really it is just down to neurological challenges. And no matter how many, no matter how many names you get for it, you're still not going to be able to get the right combination of activities and treatments unless somebody really understands where it's all coming from.
Right. And, this is something that, when my grandfather started this work, in the Doman Method in the 1950s, he was starting it in a very different world, a world where, the stigma around having any kind of special need was so great. Children were kind of hidden away, institutionalized immediately, taken away from their parents. It was really a, a terrible time for children with neurodevelopmental issues. And my grandfather used to notice that every decade or two, new diagnoses would come in and old diagnoses would go out. For example, when he started in the 1950s, most people don't even believe this when I say it. The most common diagnoses that he saw were moron, imbecile, idiot. Those were the diagnoses that were given to children with special needs.
Clinical terms.
Clinical terms, like in their clinical chart written by a doctor. And at a certain point, parents started to say, you know what, I don't think my child is an idiot or a moron or an imbecile. Thank you very much. And so they came up with a new term, mental retardation. They said, your child's, got mental retardation. And
Just a little slow.
A little slow. Exactly. Yeah. Again, symptom, right? It's a symptom. Yeah. Mental retardation at a certain point, became an insult. So then they changed it to, developmental delay or, whatever, one of the hundreds of terms. And what my grandfather said was that, humans think that because they put a name on something, it means they understand it. And this is something which is very true. People think, autism. Okay, I've got a box. I can put this person in the box of autism. Now we figured it out. And no, you haven't figured it out because you still don't know why that's happening or what to do about it. But because you put a name on it, it feels convenient. It's a funny thing that humans do, but we do it, and we do it at a mass scale. And it's sad because so many children have been held back because of it. And I want to say about the functional testing that we do at Doman International at a first appointment with a child. The reason why we can pinpoint the areas of the brain that are affected is because there are certain tests we can do with a child and by the way, when I say test, I don't even mean the child has to be a willing participant. For example, we can do reflexes. It doesn't require any effort from the child, but there are certain reflexes that if we do it, we know, this means the child is injured in the cortex, or this reflex, if it's immature, it means the midbrain has been affected. And then we also know if a child's speech has been impacted or if their vision has been impacted, what areas of the brain have been affected. And then it becomes a rather easy next step for us to say, well, if this child has been severely impacted in the midbrain, what are the different techniques we're going to give this child to help stimulate the midbrain? Or if this child has been affected in the cortex, what are the parts of the program that we can do to stimulate the cortex? So that functional neurological evaluation is very helpful because it provides us with information we need for the child's treatment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny how often I talk to parents who tell me my child received this diagnosis, right? Very often it's autism. They say my kid has received an autism diagnosis, but then they say, I just don't feel like that really covers it. Or they start telling me all ways in which their child doesn't fit that diagnosis. Right. And I say, yeah, because your kid is your kid. Even if there are some symptoms that track with an autism diagnosis, your child's experience is going to be different. But of course, you went to the developmental specialist or whatever. They ran their tests, their evaluations and things, and they are looking for a box to put your kid in. And I'm not saying that they're trying to dismiss your child's challenges or but their whole framework is, what category can we put this child in so that we know how to start prescribing the PT, the OT, whatever. Or often, again, in the United States at least, it's about what kinds of services do you qualify for? You know,
Yeah, exactly.
that
And
age.
now that there's a whole financial and money element around this,
Yeah.
there's even more reason to, so now before a doctor could say, your child has autism, I'm sorry, there's not much we can do. Now they can say, your child has autism, here are these resources that can get paid for. And while that sounds very optimistic, unfortunately, it often isn't. And so we've got a nice here from a comment from Anne who says, "You are so right." And yes, I am yelling that. This makes more sense than anything I've heard about autism. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely, Anne. Yeah.
I I I think often about a mother who came to our Italian campus. I think a little over a year ago. Her daughter had graduated from high school. She had I think, a developmental delay
Mhm.
diagnosis, and they're in Europe. But mother had paid for a really excellent, very well known, very well regarded private school. Her daughter had gone all through the private school, loved school, actually, had a really nice experience, could read, not super well, but she was able to read. She had learned some life skills, which was good. But here she was at the end of her high school. She was 18, 19 years old, graduated, and at this point, mother said to the school, and to whom she'd been paying like big tuition for years, she said, "Okay, well, now that she's graduated, what do you propose?" And they were like, "What do you mean? She's graduated." And she said, "Right, but I mean, what are the next steps? We know college isn't in the cards. That's not what we were looking for anyway. I just want her to be happy. I'm glad that she can read. She's really interested in becoming an aide in a nursery school, something like that. I'd really like to have the opportunity to train for something like that." And the school said, "Well, we love her and she's a great girl, but we don't do that. We don't have any resources for that." And that's when mother realized, "Oh my gosh, like I thought I was doing the right things by having, finding this great school, and she had a really nice experience, but at the end of it, their answer was, 'Well, she's your problem now.'" And the mom said to me, she's like, I feel like such a goofball, because I really should have realized. She's like, "I thought that this all was leading up to like a life plan for my daughter, but it was that was never their goal.
Yeah.
And I thought it was their goal because it was my goal, and that's why I thought, this was the best place for her." And so she's like, it's really hard, because on the one hand, I'm glad she had a nice experience, and I'm glad for the things that she did learn, but I also feel like I wasted so much
Too much
time
time. Yeah.
thinking that this was going to set her up for life, and now realizing, oh my gosh, no, we've got to. Now, I mean, she did a program, she's doing a lot better. Like, it was for her, she needed just something to pull all the pieces together and to give her a better roadmap for adulthood and becoming more
Yeah.
independent. But I think that's something too for families, especially when your child is very young, because we all figure it out. I mean, my daughter's 21, but I was still just, you figure things out as you go as your kid is growing, even though you get advice from family and friends and the internet and whatever.
Yeah.
But it's something to really keep in mind, that ultimately it is the parent who is in the driver's seat. And so parents are the ones who, even when you go to the specialists, they're not thinking about your child's long term plan or their future. They're looking at your kid in front of them and they say, "Okay, yeah, we got to do this testing, we got to get an answer." And then they hand you something like, "Well, this is all we know." And
Yeah.
that's really hard too. But to know that as a parent, you can be empowered to find other answers and trust your gut to say,
Yeah.
"I really think that diagnosis is my kid.
Yeah.
It's not."
Yeah, and Colleen, that's one of the reasons why when a family comes to our clinic, of course, we do a functional neurological evaluation. We go over the findings with the parents. We tell them what we see. We see we talk about both the areas where the child is developing in a strong way according to our evaluations and the places where they need our help. But before our team ever meets and actually creates the child's program, we always ask the parents, what are your biggest priorities for the child? And I have to say, when parents start to tell me those things, most of them will be things I agree with and were obvious to me. but there will always inevitably be one or two things that parents have noticed that didn't come up in the evaluation. Just something that you would know being with someone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's like, oh, wow. Okay, that is a big issue. It's like, yeah, my child, when other children are playing, my child will watch them but won't interact with them. My child's fearful of interacting with other kids or something like that, where it's like, wow, that's a very important piece of information for us to have. That's why we always ask parents, what are your biggest priorities? And then and very often when we're having a staff meeting, we'll start off the meeting saying, here's this child, here are their issues, and inevitably a staff member will say, what are the parents' top priorities? Because that gives us really, really important information. So if you are joining right now, whether you're on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, go ahead and type your questions into the comments box, and we will do our best to get to all of them. Colleen, I do want to just make a couple of quick announcements. I'd like us to talk for just about our upcoming trips that Doman International is doing. So we are in August, and we do have appointments available year-round at our center, our headquarters here in Philadelphia. Later in August, we are doing appointments in Australia and in New Zealand. So if you're interested in having an appointment in Oceania, reach out to us as soon as possible. In September, at the end of September, we're going to have appointments in Serbia and Croatia. In October, we're going to have appointments at our European headquarters, which is in Pisa, Italy. In November, we're going to be in Bangalore and New Delhi, India, and also in Dubai. And you know what I missed? Sorry, in September, we're also going to be doing appointments in Miami, Florida.
Yeah, at the end of September.
Yeah, exactly. And in December, we have appointments in Moscow, Russia. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about those appointments and possibly setting one up for your child, you can reach out to us. Colleen, do you mind just giving your contact information?
Not at all. So my name is Colleen, and these are my direct contact numbers and email. They come right to me. My email address is info, INFO, @domaninternational.org. And my phone number is country code 1-814-232-8668. And that's a cell phone. So you can text me, you can WhatsApp, Telegram, whatever is most easy for you, or you can give me a call. And that's the quickest way to get in touch with us directly. You can also message us on social media. I see those messages too. But yeah, contacting directly. There's not an obligation when you contact us. We just have a lot of information and a lot of resources to share. So, it's best to start as soon as possible. Even if you're thinking about an appointment for later this year or even early next year, get in touch with us so you can start taking advantage of all of those resources to learn, because there's so much.
Yeah, I see we're starting to get questions coming in on Instagram. I did want to just mention that if you're in Florida, families in Florida can be supported on our program through the program Step Up for Students. And if you're a family in Wisconsin, families now can be helped by CLTS, which is Children's Long-Term Support with Medicaid. So within those two states, families can get support with our program. We're also very close. If my colleague Les is here, maybe she could just let me know where we stand. Oh yeah, if you are a part of the TEFA program in Texas, you can also get help with our program through that as well. Thank you, Les. And of course, if you jump on a call with Colleen can talk to you a bit about that, and also Les can help families on those programs enroll our program with those programs, and also can answer any questions you have. All right. Anything else, Colleen, you want to add before we jump into the questions?
No, that's everything. We got all
Perfect. Did we get any pre-submitted questions?
We we received one in Spanish.
Okay.
Christian, she just said, "I want to learn more about the brain and its development in relation to learning." So I don't know if she has a child with special needs or not, but I am going to connect her with Marialva.
Okay, that would be good. Yeah, because I think especially because we talked a lot about the issues of diagnosis, and yeah, so I think it'd be wonderful if she spoke with Mariapa and got those questions answered. All right, we've got a question here from Farah on Instagram. I joined late, so not sure if you are done with. No, we're starting questions, Farah. So you're at the right time. My 13-month-old with Down syndrome has been belly crawling since 7 months old. Not symmetrical though. When we pattern, she locks her left leg 95% of the time. Do we force the patterning? Good question. So, first of all, yeah, for a 13-month-old who is crawling, definitely patterning can be very helpful for those anyone who's joining who doesn't know this. Patterning is an activity that we do with certain children to teach their brain how it feels to move in a correct cross pattern. So for example, when we any form of human mobility, crawling on the belly, creeping on the hands and knees, walking and running, we do in a cross pattern, which means our right arm moves with our left leg synchronized and our left arm moves with our right leg. And so patterning is one of the oldest treatments in the Doman method and is a very effective treatment for improving coordination, giving children better mobility. So for your child, Farah, definitely patterning can be helpful. As for forcing, no, I would never want to use the word force, especially because we don't want to physically hurt a child. So what we would generally do, Farah, is if we're doing the patterning activity and a child is locking a knee, my first recommendation is actually to send us a video. And if you have a staff coach on the program, I would send them a video and say, hey, what are your thoughts about this? The reason why it's important, some children might stiffen up because they're just playing games and giving some resistance. Kids are kids, right? But some children, it might be because of discomfort or something just not being done in the right way, like a limb isn't being moved in the right way. So I would make sure that that you send a video to your staff coach to review it. And for any family on the Doman International program, if your staff coach is not a member of the mobility staff, they will send it to a member of the mobility staff who teach patterning, and they will give it a watch and give you feedback. So that is the best possible thing that you could do. Yeah, very often when we watch the video, something will jump out at us. But yeah, we don't want to force it. All right. Now, some children, I don't know if this applies to you, Farah. Some children, when you're doing a patterning exercise, or really any treatment activity, sometimes if you just stop for a few seconds, you let the child relax a little bit and you get restarted, it goes better. You just need to give them a few seconds. But again, sending the video would help us guide you with that. All right, I've got a comment here from Lucy. Lucy says, my son was on the program. We did not improve much learning-wise, but he did improve physically, like with running and swimming. Went back to school last year. He forgot everything. Now starting homeschooling again. What is the best way to restart? Okay. Lucy, my first question is, when you say you were on the program, were you on the Doman International program? Colleen, do you know Lucy?
I don't right off the top of my head. I'm sorry, okay. But it could
be. Sometimes there are name tags we don't connect it with. So yeah, Lucy, my first question would be was it the Doman International program? And if yes, how long did you do it for? But to answer your question in terms of restarting, so my typical answer to parents would be, okay, I would get started first with the physiological parts of the Doman method. Like I'd start first with nutrition and our respiratory program. So I'm assuming if you've done the program in the past, you've done the Doman oxygenation program, the breathing enhancement program using the specialized mask. So if you did those programs, I would restart those first. Okay. Then I would layer in the mobility exercises that our team taught you. And then last but not least, I would layer in the cognitive activities. Meaning if you were doing a reading program with your child, or math, or encyclopedic knowledge, we would layer in those things, usually last. I do think, Lucy, one of my concerns when I'm reading your message is you said that he didn't gain much from a cognitive standpoint. And now every child is different, right? But most of the time, cognitive changes tend to be, on average, the easiest changes for us to achieve. Because the cognitive areas involve the sensory areas, like seeing, hearing, feeling. That's how we learn. And so usually for us to get change through the sensory areas tends to be easier than the motor areas, which are like mobility, speech, manual ability. So that's why I'm also asking specifically, did you do the Doman International program? Who was your staff coach? If you'd prefer to send us a private message, you can, because I know sometimes people don't want to write about things publicly. I'll throw up Colleen's contact info. And again, Lucy, you might be someone we know and have known for years, but we just don't recognize the name and your YouTube handle. Colleen, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think just please get in touch with us directly, Lucy, because especially if you're going back to homeschooling, you'll have time. Like, we can help you so that you feel like you're making gains and that your time is used wisely, because that's a huge thing when you got your kid home all day. So what am I doing? Everything that's going to be beneficial and also not driving you crazy.
Yeah, and actually here, just by chance today, we have a family in our clinic who did our program some years ago and had great changes with their son. And then, after a few years, they decided, there are some things we want to, still focus on. And so now they're back, and that happens, so yeah, you're always welcome back. Okay, let's see if we've got any other questions here. Whether you're joining right now on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, go ahead and type your questions into the comments, and we will get to them. Yeah, and maybe just to give a kind of final thought on our topic for today, which related to the confusion around diagnoses and how they're often not connected with root cause issues. I think that, and my grandfather Glenn used to say this, that if we could fix the problem of diagnosis, we would be half of the way toward solving all the problems of children with developmental issues, because it would clear up a lot of the confusion. If every parent in the world just knew what areas of their child's brain weren't fully developed, well, then, and if all researchers knew that as well, now we could all focus our time, effort, and attention on where the root cause problem lies. And so that gives us a huge leg up, right? Because if someone looks at a child and says, well, this child has autism or cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, and they have some kind of mysterious disease that can't be cured, that's very different from the approach of a team who says, well, we know what areas of the child's brain have been affected, and we know activities to help those areas of the brain, right? There's two groups of people are going to interact very, very differently.
I'll say too, not among our population, like parents who inquire with us are definitely thinking like, okay, I'm not willing to accept that the answer, my child has autism, is like a dead end street kind of,
Yeah.
Do what we can do. But there are a lot of people out there who talk about autism as something that they like have, like you just
Yeah.
have it, like it's a like I have a cold, you know,
Yeah.
um, as opposed to something that you know it isn't even a standard thing. I mean, it's this collection of it might as well be called autism syndrome because there are so
Yeah.
many different symptoms that then are ascribed to, oh, your child has autism.
Right.
But yeah, it's treated like, well, there really isn't any. It's just an inherent part of who you are, who your child is, and I think that's such a. It's so limiting. It
Yeah.
really makes me angry. Actually, I get very unhappy. I also get unhappy with people I know who are, you know, what most people would consider neurotypical, but also because they have a great interest in trains or something. They're like, oh, I have a little touch of the. I'm like, that is really offensive to me. Like, you do
Yeah.
not have neurological issues. You hold a job. You are an independent adult. Don't start, appropriating things that are not okay. Like that's not your thing.
Correct. Correct. So we have a comment here from blog.seattle who says, I took the parent course 2 years ago and have been implementing, and I've seen incredible changes on my son, especially in the motor functions. We're still working on speech, but I just wanted to say thank you. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, wonderful. And I mean, listen, you've done a great job. I mean, getting changes over the last few years. And I think for someone checking in after some time, just some of the recommendations I would give is, first of all, look, at if maybe you've already read all of the books, but things like the Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, if you haven't read those books, I'd recommend the ones we've released in the last maybe 3 years or so. Those might be helpful.
Or if you haven't read them recently.
If you haven't read them recently, yeah, because very often you're reading it for a different child when you reread them. And I would also just recommend reaching out to Colleen as well, because even if you don't think it's in your cards to come to our clinic for an appointment, we do have things like remote consultation options, things that can work into the schedules even of families who can't travel, or who may just want guidance on certain areas of their child's development. So I would recommend reaching out to Colleen regardless. All right, we've got a comment here from Yoko who says, I learned the Doman Method a long time ago, and my gift to new parents is always Doman's book. Do you have any recommendations for a particular book? Yeah, great advice. Yoko, it depends on, Yuko, I'm sorry. Yuko. Yeah, so it depends on the challenges or the goals that the parent has. If we're talking about a child with special needs, we recommend the book, The Doman Method, From Special Needs to Wellness. And I'm sorry, I don't have a copy right next to me right now. But if you go onto Amazon and you just look up The Doman Method, you'll see it. It's written by myself and by my dad, Douglas. And it is the kind of foundational book that we recommend to parents of children with developmental delays or special needs. For the parent of for a parent of a child who is well and neurotypical and they just want to learn about early childhood education, my first book I always recommend is my grandfather's book, How to Teach Your Baby to Read. In my opinion, it is his. I think it's his best written book. I think it's a paradigm changing book for a lot of parents. And we have a sister company, Doman Learning, that provides courses and materials for parents who want to learn about the early childhood educational approaches of the Doman Method, which you can find, Yuko, at domanlearning.com. So you may want to check those out as well. Colleen, anything you want to add to that?
No, it's such a wonderful gift to give people. Hopefully earlier if somebody's expecting, because they're not going to have time to read after the baby gets there unless they're up late at night. But actually that was when my parents found out about the Doman Method. My father read How to Teach Your Baby to Read to my mother when she was up feeding my youngest brother. So that was something that they did, which was a nice bonding thing. But yeah, no, it's change. Yuko, if then changes your life.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, thank you to everyone for all of your questions. We're going to be back here next week with a special topic. It was the topic we were planning on doing today for everyone who joined a little later. We had an interview planned today. Unfortunately, our guest couldn't make it, but it will be next week. I'm going to be interviewing a mom by the name of Cleisha Peterson about a book she just wrote called Great Victory, A Mother's Faith, A Daughter's Fight. She wrote the book about her experiences as the mom of Maya, who you can see here. And Maya is a child who has suffered a brain injury and has been on the Doman Method. And so I'm going to be interviewing Cleisha about her book and about her experience in doing our program with her daughter.
I know she's really excited to join, so it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a really good book. I read it. It's a quick read too, so it's very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And I do see here that we've thrown the link on Facebook for you, Yuko, which is it's a page with a link to parent literature. So if you want to check out our different books, you can check them out there. Okay, and I'll. Sorry, say again, Colleen.
They are all there.
They're all there.
They're there, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. And I'm just putting up Colleen's contact information one more time. If you have any questions on any topic, you can contact Colleen at info@domaninternational.org or message or call her at +1, which is the US country code, 814-232-8668. Colleen and everyone else, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey.